Hey, guys, this episode is brought to you by TeePublic. You guys know TeePublic. I've been with TeePublic forever, since the Schmodown days, since the big thing launched. If you have a Sith Council shirt, if you have any of our shirts, you got them from TeePublic. From over the years, we've been working with TeePublic. When I went out on my own, they were one of the first calls that I made. So not only can you get all of the branded merch from this show, t-shirts, stickers, phone cases, mugs, all that, when you are on the site, do a search. You're going to discover something that you like, especially in this space, man. An artist uploads new work to the TeePublic marketplace every 5 seconds. Because of the thousands of global artists that populate the marketplace, you're going to find designs you won't find at a big box store, especially if your interests are super niche. Doesn't matter what you're into, you can find it on TeePublic. You want a graphic tee of a cat riding a unicorn? Check. A t-shirt with your favorite movie quote? Got it. You want merch for the big thing? Hey, that's what you want, obviously. I've been using TeePublic forever. If you guys know me from back in the day, I've been talking about them that long. So it was obvious that I was going to be using them again, and I'm so glad that I did. So many of you guys, when I see you at some of the events, you're wearing the big thing shirts, and it all comes from TeePublic. And browse around on my link. It's going to be in the iCard right there. It's going to be in the description right there. Browse around. You will find stuff that you like. So I'm happy that they're on the show. They're sponsoring the show now. TeePublic, everybody. Check them out. What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. It's UAP Tuesday. That's what we're doing. So for all you people that are brand new to the channel, thank you so much. For people who are just joining for the first time, do me a favor, hit that button. We do this every Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's the movie stuff. That's the TV stuff. So if you're a regular viewer there and you're like, what the heck's going on? Don't worry. Nothing's changed. However, if you're joining us today, we're talking about a whole lot of things, man. There's still information coming out about the UAPs and what's happening after those hearings. And the question is what they tried to do, the smear campaign with David Grusch, and did it have any effect? We'll talk about that. Riley's not in today. Riley will be back next week, but I got Attack Peter for the whole show, so we'll be talking to him. There's some video about potentially the Malaysia plane. Is it real? Is it a hoax? We don't know. We'll talk about some other things, theories, but as you saw in the title, the question is, let's say hypothetically, whether you believe or you don't believe that whatever these UAPs, UFOs are, let's say hypothetically it is, we find out that it's other life, it's extraterrestrial life. How do you think the world would handle it? How do you think humankind would handle it? We're going to talk about all that and more. So, once again, if you haven't already done it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere podcasts are found. Let's get into it. It's myself. It's Attack Peter. It's the big thing. Let's do it. That's right, everybody. It is the big thing. As I mentioned, Mark Riley not here on Tuesday, but if you have been tuning into the show, you know that a couple weeks ago, we had on my buddy Attack Peter. He has been so kind to join me here, the great artist, Attack Peter. What's up, man? How are you?
What's up, dude? Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you, man. So it's funny because we've always kind of thrown texts towards each other and caught up with each other, see how we're doing post, and even during the Skybound era. But now we've kind of found a new bond inside of all this stuff.
Yes, and thank God, because I think some of my friends and family are tired of hearing me talk about it. So now I just save it for this.
Same, 100%. And it's funny because we'll talk about that and more. And for people who are tuning into this show for the first time or reoccurring, the idea of what we wanted to do here on Tuesdays is that, I think even Peter might be a little bit more, I would say locked in, but definitely has been following the story a lot longer than I have. I've always been curious about it, but my point of view is more so like the everyday person that is kind of listening more about the facts and those things, because I think that that's what more people are going to do and need to do. Is that like I don't know if you noticed though, man. Yes, I agree with you that that there are times that I talk about it with my friends and family, and they're just like, "Oh, here we go," and I become like the alien guy or whatever, even though you're talking about UFOs. But I will say, more and more people are talking about it now. I don't know if it's just going to be just right now because it was in the news because of the hearings, but it does seem like a little bit of a shift. Am I wrong?
No, I think certainly people are less thrown off by it. I think what always has existed is people don't know how to talk about this,
Right.
because and I throw myself into that too. I sometimes I don't know what it even is that we're really getting into. I just know that I have a strong curiosity, whether this ends up being total nonsense or like totally legit. It's fascinating either way, and I just love talking about stuff like this because it's just, to me, it's fun, and then it might be the most important thing of all time.
I mean, yeah, if it's true, it's definitely the most important thing of all time. And we have so much stuff to talk about. And that's the other thing I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, yeah, I'm getting into really diving into this. And we made it a show on Tuesday. And she's like, well, how long do you think that you're going to be able to talk about this? I was like, I could talk about this every day, 5 days a week. And I don't think it's ever going away. This is 80 years of stuff just in general. And one of the things I thought about even doing, not necessarily on today's episode, but down the line, is like, I've talked about that O'Hare incident so many different times. You do a full episode on the O'Hare incident. You could do a full episode talking about the Hudson episode. You can do all these things that have happened, that case. You can really just talk about that because, and I think what's so important about that is that that's the type of stuff that started to convince me. Because as I've told people, and again, I'm repeating myself if you've been watching me over the last couple of weeks on this, but if you haven't, I was always curious and I always believed that there were things going on out there that we weren't being told about. And I thought it was silly to think that we were the only things in the universe, right? However, I was always thinking like, oh, that'd be fun. Look at the Ancient Alien show and on History Channel. But it was that series, man, the UFOs Investigating the Unknown, that 5-part series that really takes the cast of characters from this community. Because if you start to pay attention to the UFO community, you see a lot of the stuff, whether it's James Fox or Leslie Kean or Steven Greer, or the more and more you hear about these people, you start to see there is the hierarchy of this community,
What's funny is I always try to, especially when you started covering it, it made me start to think about the analogs in the pop culture coverage community, and where we're all talking about the same thing, week to week, day to day.
Yeah.
But there are certain voices that are more credible. There are certain voices that kind of like filter it through better. And, why I was excited that you were starting to cover it is that I know you're not like emotionally attached to anything. You don't have like any stake in the game. You're just interested like I am, and I think people relate and resonate to that. And because that's the way we should approach it. Like, when we talk about the SAG-AFTRA strike on shows, like, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's interesting and it could be very impactful. So this is just one of those things. And having someone aggregate it, filter it, and put it forward like, guys, I don't have a dog in this fight. I just think it's interesting, and we should probably like start breaking it down because, like you said, and I'm honestly there with you. Like I've been paying attention for a long time, but it's only recently that I started to go, okay, what exactly has been going on? That documentary you talked about is excellent, and it gets us all kind of like at the same starting point to say, okay, going from here. It's like if you're listening to a murder mystery podcast where we're like, this has already been established. We're just going to try to break it down and see if we find out anything.
Yeah, that's right. And I had my buddy on the other show, my buddy DJ Wooldridge, he's just a great dude, right? He really is. And he's like my screening buddy, because when I see him at movie screenings, he's always sitting in the back. And I love sitting in the back away from people, and like we always just kind of like bond over there, right? But he is like a full-on skeptic, which is fine. And I've said this many times over. I think being a skeptic on anything is healthy as long as you have the information and the right stuff to back it up. As long as you're not a blind believer and you're not a blind skeptic. Like that's the thing you have to go into this thing. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do on this show, was to give people who did believe a safe space to go, look, man, I'm not like, there are people I've found so far since doing this show that there are people who have been locked into this forever, that are so deep in it, that's all they think about. And I encourage those types of people to come in here and give us, and they're sending us links and telling us things I love that. Then there's other people like you and I that are like, I don't know, I just think that there might be something out there. I do believe it the more I learn. And then there's other people who are like, I don't know, man. It's just, there's nothing out there. Every time I see there's grainy footage or there's there's nothing. And but they're watching. It's the people that like, and this is my buddy DJ, who I use an example. I bring up like, well, what do you think about, if you don't believe it, what can you explain to me the O'Hare thing? He's like, I don't know what the O'Hare thing is. I'm like, okay, well, what about when the reports of the guys that were working in the nuclear facility in the 60s, when all the nukes just shut off, they saw something in flow. I don't know anything about that. I'm like, well, you can't you got to have the conversation. You can be a skeptic and go, well, here's my reason. I think that what may have happened there instead was this, because James Fox was on some show recently with a bunch of skeptics, and there was one guy that was actually, and James actually apologized to him because James came off pretty defensive, and the guy's like, no, I like your work, I watch your stuff, but like and the guy watches the stuff, he just he doesn't believe, and he had reasons on why he thought, and I was like, I encourage people like that. But then there was another guy on the show that just had this face the whole time, and he probably didn't watch anything. And it's like, that's the stuff I can't engage in conversations with people who don't have, who don't pay attention to it. You can watch a whole full documentary, and then we can then say, I'm on this side, I'm on this side. I love those conversations because you have to have my sense, my point of view. That's just not healthy.
Yeah, for the record, and for my whole life, my favorite conversations are usually about interesting topics that don't have solid, clear answers. And my favorite people to talk about them with are people who come from a totally different perspective and potentially change my view on something. Right. I don't like sitting around people who just say, yeah, I agree. It's fine, but it's not engaging, not entertaining. I don't grow from that. So I like being challenged on it. And if this whole thing ends up, I think where there's smoke, there's fire generally. And even if this all ends up being BS, I think that's fascinating and important too, because it'll be one of the biggest moments where the public can say, did we just get like taken for a ride for a specific
what's
reason?
The BS? The biggest BS, the only, at least in my opinion, of everything that I've seen so far, of all this stuff that I've watched, the biggest BS thing that I could see coming out of this, which is still factual proof it would be if this turns out to be what it is that extraterrestrial life has not visited this planet in years and has not been here in years. But what those things are a reverse engineered thing that the government has been working on since the 40s or since the 50s and have been using it. And we have access to it when we have this, like a cover up that where it was like, we could be helping the environment. We could be helping with this stuff. That to me would be as big of a story as if they're still visiting now, which a lot of people say that they still are. But that's the type of thing, like, because what I don't understand is when someone goes, well, there's nothing out there. Well, then what is it?
Right.
They don't have the answer to follow up. They never follow up. They never go, oh, it's just other equipment. But like, because again, my friend DJ was like, well, that's just it's just probably other government. I don't trust our government that we don't have it. Yeah, but how does the human body then of so many different people who've witnessed stay in the thing that goes like this and flips it?
You wouldn't be able to. But even if they were unmanned drone type technology, right? Which is possible. Sure. It's like that's another thing. Like, you now are saying that the government or private corporations at work, whatever it ends up being, has kept technology from the people that could change our planet, change our life. To make it a silly personal example, I just did 5 trips for work in 2 months, and it was hellish having to deal with some of the airport stuff and the delays, and one of the planes overheated and it ruined the whole trip. Forget about it. It's like we're on this dated ancient technology because nothing has changed in years and years and years in air travel. Imagine if that's the case, and the only reason they're holding it back is to keep an upper hand on rival countries or whatever it is. That would be a huge bummer, man.
It would be, and it's also not surprising because look, there's so many different reports out there, and again, this is why I always encourage people to either be skeptics, leave their comments on it, because I saw something recently. You and I were just talking about, like, what's your overall thought on Steven Greer?
I just full disclosure, I do like watching him talk from time to time, but when I watch it, it's kind of, if I'm being honest, it's kind of like a guilty pleasure of what is this guy talking about?
He kind of fits into the ancient aliens type thing.
Yeah, and I also, I've always been very dismissive of that as like, oh, I'm sure that's fun and entertaining, but I don't have time and it's probably nonsense. So I kind of put that in there, although I'm willing to be proven wrong if I'm wrong about that. I don't get a sense that there's any like nutrition in those conversations. Like, it feels like empty calories when I listen to it, because it's a lot of major, claims without really much in the way of evidence. And I'm okay with that if it's a very credible source, but if it's under oath in the middle. Right.
And
even under oath, like, it's possible that someone could be manipulating stuff. There have been people who've perjured themselves for many reasons in the past. So it's not that that's like the defining moment, but you have to earn that credibility over time. And unfortunately, I feel like there's not enough yet. I'm not saying it's total BS or whatever, but I don't get, my gut feeling is that I can't take anything away from that guy just yet. And like I said, full disclosure, I want to believe it.
Did you watch his doc?
I've watched him on a bunch of things. I've seen he's had multiple docs. I've seen one where he's talking about that he can summon the craft, and he takes people out to a field and they're apparently summoning UFOs or UAPs over them. And then so they show a camera footage of the sky, and they're all sitting around like on lawn chairs. And he goes, if you just everybody meditate, and then like what looks like a shooting star happens. And if you could even summon a shooting star, that would be impressive. But I don't know what I'm looking at, you know?
Right. So the thing I have with Greer is I have a lot of different. He does seem he makes some outrageous claims. I mean, he's got some. I mean, there was one there he's talking about like how that he talked to somebody that inside of this program that if you can imagine anything inside of Star Trek technology that the government has access to it. So you're talking about teleportation and all these types of. And I don't know. But what the only thing that I when I think about Steven Greer in general is. It's just there's not a lot of people out there. I know there's some people who say he's not legit but he's worked with Clinton. He's worked with and from what apparently from what he said, he wrote a lot of the questions that Burchett and a lot of these guys asked at the hearing were questions that he wrote to ask them.
I want to believe him. I do feel like.
But wouldn't Burchett say that's bullshit if that wasn't the case? Wouldn't Burchett come out and go, what the hell's Steven Greer? I never talked to Steven Greer. I know,
but I also, and I'm happy that Burchett's there, but I also feel like in my gut, if I'm going devil's advocate against myself, I feel like those are two, I get a gut instinct that they are
me, look at me. That type of
maybe, but also more like that if I wanted to manipulate someone, I would manipulate someone who wants to believe. And wants to, like in other words, I wouldn't have to show too much.
I agree. Listen, sure, but there's a difference between manipulating if someone wants to believe and then getting them to be able to ask your questions to the pilots.
No. That's what I'm saying. Greer clearly has some kind of background that makes him credible in those circles, but also like we live in a world where we know that, our government has done things like MK Ultra and put soldiers and up to stuff with experimental testing on hallucinogens. In other words, like it wouldn't blow me away. I'm not saying this happened. It wouldn't blow me away if he was like some kind of patsy to go out there and feed other internal people like Burchett information that compromises all of them, because you could end up disproving it at some point if you needed to.
Yeah,
That's just super devil's advocate.
Right.
I'd be happy to know that he wasn't full of it, because he does seem, it's hard. It would be hard to lie as consistently as he does with such a depth of detail and information. Like that's unlikely too, so I'm kind of in the middle with them.
Yeah. Well, the answer to my question a lot of times when I talk about like Fravor or Graves, right?
Those guys strike me as super credible. I don't have that reaction.
100%. Like when I and Grusch, when I talk about those three guys, it's like, to me, when I say what do they have to gain here, and people are like, oh, they can write books. Fravor hasn't written shit.
And by the way, he didn't need this to write a book. If he wanted to write a book about his career, I'm sure, especially on the heels of Top Gun,
real maverick. He
didn't
have to. So he didn't have to do shit. And
in fact, he probably compromise his ability to do that if he wanted to now with a certain audience.
100%. And he could, and he has. And look, Graves has a podcast, but Graves' podcast is just bringing attention to this in the same way that we're doing it, right? Like, so, and if you're going to listen to somebody who you really want to know more about the facts of, you're not going to listen to me talk about it. You're going to listen to Graves. And Graves has his own podcast. So like, and he probably monetizes it and does whatever, and fine, but he's getting the information out there. So there's a difference, and he's not making hand over fist on the whole. But the Steven Greer aspect is the one where I can say, like, he has turned this into doing lectures and doing all these things, everything too. So I can understand if someone's like, well, this guy is in it for the money or this too. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm saying
No.
I can understand it because there's some shit that he says sometimes. I'm like, well, if this stuff is true, it's crazy. Like he's talking about how the government's planning to do they're gearing up to do a fixed alien invasion with the technology that they've been reverse engineering for the last 70 years, and they want the public to feel like it's under attack, so that way it's like the shit that he's claiming is out of control. But the same, that's when I asked myself a question: if he's batshit crazy or if he's just full of shit, then why is he still locked into the circles and there are people still taking his phone calls? You know, it's like there was one guy, I can't remember who the guy was. There was some guy who's very locked into this stuff, and I can't remember his name, but like, and he posted they had invited him on, I think, News Nation or The Hill or something like that. Yeah. And then he retweeted it out, and he's like, I spoke too soon. They canceled my appearance because I guess he was just too. If you had him on, you'd probably seem a little bit too out there. You know what I mean? Because there's other people like Russ Colbert and people like that are locked in, that people are starting to take really serious. And I can't tell where people land on Greer yet. I don't know.
So I'll say two things to steel man him, right? To give him some credibility. There is something that called Project Blue Beam, not Blue Book.
Yes.
You know, so Blue Beam, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I got this wrong, essentially is a at least if it's not declassified, it's at least leaked or whatever it was.
Yeah.
A government document that essentially said that our military was planning to use holographic projections of Christ coming back, to Earth, Muhammad appearing, or alien UFO ships projected in a battlefield over the enemy to distract them and freak them out so they'd be easy to overcome. So that's something that I think people can search for themselves and see that is a real thing that was entertained, right? Yeah. It's crazy, but suddenly him saying that, it's not so crazy. Like, you could see it, like the government is trying to, and by the way, like based on our history where, we've gone to war for things that end up not being the real reason we go to war for.
Like dog stuff.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see that would be a fun one to use. Like, hey, listen, we got a fun, like that was something that I heard talked about this week. Like, if you have an invested interest in space, military, whatever, Space Force, whatever it is, you need an enemy so that you can rally the people behind you to spend on such a thing. And then the other thing I'll say to then, I guess straw man Greer is, there's always a person in the conversation that you don't want on your side, right? Like if this person agrees with me, I'm going to look worse, right? Even if they're saying all the right things and agreeing with all your points and backing you up, it actually hurts your argument if such a person agrees with you. Like there's a guy out there, David Icke, that people always refer to when they want to say that certain government or certain conspiracy theories are total BS, right? Well, look, you sound like David Icke now. The guy believes in the reptilian people and all this stuff like that, right? Right. And he said he was Jesus who come back. It was a whole thing. Okay. And so those people out there get people who are on the fence or skeptics to stop paying attention because this is crazy talk. So I think there's a world where Greer could be a useful tool in a counterintelligence operation.
I see what you're saying, because it's like if you get those people, like again using my buddy DJ as an example. Let's say DJ watches those 5 parts, to where inside of those 5 parts of that documentary, it's not really about, hey, we're gonna, and even Burchett said it, it's not about trying to convince you that little green men exist. It's about trying to find out what's safe in our airspace. That is what this was all about, and that's what people want to know in general. But then Greer is full on like, no, there's been aliens here for years and this and that. So if you're DJ and you watch those 5 parts and you're like, okay, I have questions, it's interesting, but then you turn on, the next thing you see is Steven Greer, and Greer's just like, then you can go, now this is too much for me, because the question does remain, and I think that it's a fair question for everybody who asks, is that it's always like these grainy pictures, right? It's like with all the stuff that we have and all the technology that we have. My answer to that too is that if you believe the reports, is that there's full clear on satellite people. We should have satellite pictures. We do. We just haven't been released. There's the dude that was running that program that Leslie Kean first found. He was like, there's tons of clear photos. And so it's a matter of when those are going to be released. The thing that was interesting that I've seen not only from Greer and other people too that I do buy some, that I think has some merit, is the fact that this is all coming out now, and the fact that everybody's talking about this now, and the fact that maybe it's one of these things where there's just so long with the advancement of technology before people really start getting clear-cut views, before somebody actually does say, well, what the hell is this? And somebody finally live streams something or something along those lines to where they go, well, that can't be hidden anymore. So they're getting it out in the public now to where it's like, because I saw this other thing. Somebody sent me this thing where we covered that story last week that the aliens are supposed to show up in 2027 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And then there was something that,
I hate stuff like that, by the way.
Yeah, because like I said last week, plans change.
Yeah.
It's like
sorry, couldn't make it.
Yeah, I have a plan for my kid's birthday. It was supposed to be at 4 p.m. But the guy that's going to play music called and said, I'm not available until 12. So we shift the thing to 10 o'clock. So it was no longer. So at one point we thought it was going to be at 3, but now it's at 10. So
it feels like the whole 2012 and 2020 thing all over again, where it's like,
don't give me dates.
No, exactly.
It's like, it's the first thing I want to see is I just want them. I think that, because here, this is again what I think the main topic of the conversation would be, before we go to our first break. But I do want to ask you this. Like, let's say hypothetically, more whistleblowers come back, and we are going to talk about what happened to David Grusch, which I think was just deplorable. And we'll talk about all the whistleblowers that were like scared to see what was going to happen to them if more people come out and more information comes out. And what I did agree with Steven Greer, what he said, you can't, if there are these illegal facilities happening and these programs that are happening and all these different places that are happening, you can't say, okay, now we're going to go look for them, because they're going to pack up and they're going to go somewhere else.
It's just so silly.
You got to raid them. And and the one thing I thought was awesome that Greer did, whether it was just hyperbole or whatever it was, I thought it was hilarious. And I thought it was baller. He's just like, I just want to say this to anybody who are working at these facilities: when it comes time, don't resist. It's like, when they show up, don't resist. Don't fight back. Just put your hands on the desk. I'm like, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And so, but that's essentially what they would have to do, right? Like, they would have to do. And let's say hypothetically, Peter, they do this and they have clear-cut evidence to where people like my friend DJ and people that there is no longer a place where they can go, this isn't real, this is real. And there is some kind of otherworldly ships, and B, proof that there are other, whether it's interdimensional, whatever it might be, that there's proof of other life. How do you realistically think that humans, not just United States, humans are going to deal, if proven hypothetically that life exists on the planet? So how are we going to deal with that as a society?
I certainly think that this is how you would prepare a society, is a drip and a little bit
lead,
like boiling frogs, right? So by the time it happens, you would have less panic. Because I'll say this: if there was a decision to disclose, it would be a bad idea to do it abruptly all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. But if there was a slow, drop of information, and I bet you there's a possibility that if this is really happening, there are warring factions internally. But I think it comes. I'm more concerned about the cultures that are more closely tied to dogmatic religion and things like that, because I've already heard people like in my world, where if they are religious, they're usually either Roman Catholic or Jewish, and in my part of the country. And it's like, I've heard people say like, well, it doesn't challenge the scriptures or anything like that, because those are all God's creatures. I'm like, okay, I guess that's a healthy take, but I do think there are concerns where, if you suddenly realize we aren't the dominant species, or it's like when you have a substitute teacher who you don't respect because they aren't the real teacher, like, right, is there then giant amount of pushback against any kind of authority? I don't know. I
Well,
used to think
yeah.
about it during 2020, during the riots and the pandemic, and like, is this an example of what would happen if something challenged people this way? I don't know. I hope not. I hope it's a unifying force, frankly.
You kind of hope that that's what it would be, right? You hope it'd be a unifying force, especially look, the goal is that you would hope that it would be a peaceful thing, and you hope that these things would be more so of that they're so past the idea of trying to, like, what we do is so primitive in the fact that I can't remember, this is what this Harvard professor was saying, was that what human beings do is we just try to, throughout time, conquer parts of land and become our own things. And you have that land, we have this land, we have our beliefs, you have this beliefs, let's fight, and it's like that. You would hope is that these types of civilizations would be so far past that, and that would bring you to a place where you'd say, okay, let's learn more, because what if they did, what's the question everyone always asks, what's the meaning of life, right? What if these fuckers have the meaning to it?
Or what if the meaning is that, like, you guys are an experiment, like, this is the stuff that's fun to talk about for me, because it jogs my brain in a way, and it gives me,
and we're not saying it's factual or so, it's just one of these things, like you start to go into a place, and it's
like, a mental exercise,
right? And how would people deal with that? How would people really, if it would change society? I mean, it would change society tremendously, especially if you believe in the stuff that they say, with the fact that it has the opportunity. You wouldn't need oil anymore for some of these things, or what these the tech can do. You wouldn't need all these. The environment would change, these other things. Now, the thing that is fascinating to me, and this is factual, the amount of UAP sightings went up significantly. There have been reports of them throughout time, even during times when during the Renaissance, where they're painting them in pictures and shit like that.
That's wild.
It's wild. But the thing, though, it got an uptick during the after the nuke test, and after the nuke in general. And I can't remember, and this might have been a Greer thing or something else too. I've seen so many different reports of where people have talked about, like, the actual, how the energy alone connected with quantum physics and all that, how it sends a ripple, depending on what you believe in. Because the thing that I find most fascinating is the question that people rightfully so ask is, how the hell would these things be able to travel from a planet who knows how far away, considering how much time it would take them to do it? I buy into the theory that if these things do exist, and if these things are real, the quantum physics of it all, the interdimensional side of it all, even as crazy and sci-fi as it sounds, makes more sense to me than people flying around from other planets through light years that would take years upon years upon years to get here.
I'll go one further on you, that I think if this is real, and if this is to be believed, that I would think that our planet is like an embassy, or like a hub, or like a an outpost, and that there's probably some of them that are here and monitor us, you know what I mean? And so when those things happen, they come out and check it out, and maybe are they subterranean, is it interdimensional? I've heard all that stuff, but nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised about that, because I just flip it around. If it was us, like, I always talk about the Jane Goodall apes connection, like, if we were studying another animal species, or we were growing something in a lab, you try not to interfere with it, to not create other variables, so you can actually study it.
So that's why they don't get involved. But and you can understand, as human beings, like, every day we're so used to what we know, and how you're just like, this is like something out of a movie. However, I will say that I think it is because of movies, and because of the way that we're so tuned into media and all these different things, that is why I think our society today would be more acceptable.
I agree.
Of it, because we've had all these different kind of ideas in our heads, and these things that have been built, and the creativity of human beings that have been put out there before, that it's not as crazy and surreal as it is. It's not as foreign as it was in, like, 1946.
Right. Yeah, we've closed the gap substantially.
100%. So it's like, it's fascinating. It really is fascinating to see. And this is, again, why I do love the comment section of this episode, because it's like, but I will say right now, I don't know how long this is going to last, but it's been very, like, just intelligent, great conversation in the groups of people who believe, and people who don't, but even the people who don't, they've been putting out really good, like, kind of arguments for it.
Yeah.
And the main argument that I see that I can't, that the one that I push back on is the one I mentioned of like, well, this didn't happen. Why? Because I don't believe it.
Right.
Well, yeah, but why didn't? Why? But go through the facts. Why not?
That's dogmatic. That's like dogmatic as well. It's like if I always try to catch myself when I'm getting too excited about it, right? And I say, calm down, separate yourself from it, look
100%.
at it through a neutral lens. And I think it's more socially acceptable to be an extreme skeptic, and I always say that I'm Cuban American. My family comes from Cuba under Fidel Castro's regime, and I grew up with a healthy distrust of all authority figures because of what I've heard growing up. So I'm always in the camp of like, I doubt, what else is actually happening here. And this particular case has got me like really looking both ways, because once the government officials started getting involved and trying to push the narrative forward, I'm like, man, is this a government official who's like tired of the BS and willing to just roll the dice and throw down? Or is this all some kind of op to get us to not paying attention to something else? And like I said before, if it's the latter, that's a big deal too, because it's the biggest and last card you can play. What other
it's true, but that's my thing,
card can you play after that?
I agree, but the thing I've seen that, like, and I was going to say that the one, before I get to that, the one thing that I do understand, the one that I don't push back on as much, because I feel the same, is, well, let's get more than just a couple dots in the sky.
I agree.
Let's get more, like, I think there's more to it when you look into it and you listen to all the different, like the thing that Ryan Graves said about the 5% only documenting it, 95% of these pilots who don't even document it and report it because they're worried about the stigma. I totally believe it. So all that stuff, like, that's what I mean, look more into it. But I do understand of like, where's the actual photos with the stuff that I have? If I can get a lady screaming on a phone about this, how come I can't catch it? With all the people there in the world with phones that we can't catch more. I get that argument for sure.
We've talked about that too. Remember, I cited that example of, number one, do you think it's impossible that, or do people think it's impossible that advanced technology could also have a scrambler for your phone? Do you think it's impossible that that all the telecommunications companies that work in tandem with our government could be, making sure that stuff doesn't get out? Like if something posted something, it cannot go up. And then what would you have to do? Like, I tried posting and it didn't work. Now you're a crazy person. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you get or the, of course. It's like, well, I tried that. Of course, that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah, that's
now, but having said that, though, I am in the camp of like, we're getting really close to shit or get off the pot moment on both sides.
Agreed.
Frankly.
Agreed.
And I think people, and that's why I think the show is important, and you doing this is important, and other people doing it is important, because over time it just becomes a meme. It's like real change in our country's history and in humanity's history only ever happens when people as a culture, as a group, start to push for that change. It doesn't happen because a senator, proposes a bill, or you vote for the right president, or anything like that. It's only pressure. The institutions catch up to people.
Yeah.
It's always been like that.
I think it's just that we're too far past. It's a balloon. It's this. It's that.
Yeah.
It's just, we're just too far past that. I think there's got to be some kind of explanation, even if it's a matter of, look, if you're gonna, if I think you got to have that conversation. Like, we either have to have the biggest scandal ever and show people that we found this shit years ago, but we don't have any other proof that they're coming here, or we got to let the cat out of the bag. I think that it's because the other thing, again, that has been rumored, is that people are, well, how do we not have a lock, and how would they be able to run if you believe that these reports, this particular organization that's been running, has more money than the United States alone? From the, and if you think about it, if this thing does exist in the way that they say that it does, the organization of the cover up for the last 70, 80 years, if they found a way to keep themselves around for that long with all the kind of powerful people involved, it's not outside the realm of possibility. But what you were saying, as far as the cover up goes, or as far as not cover up, the distraction angle of it all, my only pushback with that is, as I've said that many times in the comments section, is when someone was like, well, this could be I saw these two people on, I think they're good reporters, but they come at it such a skeptic place, these two reporters on the Hill. And every time, some of the stuff, they clearly seem to me people who have not watched this stuff. They report on it all the time, so I give them props for reporting it all the time, and they're interviewing everybody, and they talk about it all the time. There's this One is a white dude and a black girl. That
I know who you're talking about. I forget the name.
Yeah. And they're really good reporters. I mean, really good anchors rather. But they just seem like they're just skeptics. They've said it as much too, and they report on it. But like, there's just certain ways that they approach things that I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where they're coming from.
You know what's funny? Since you bring up the Hill, I sent you before the show that link to the YouTube channel Breaking Points, and those two anchors were the anchors from the Hill, and they left the Hill. And when they did, part of the reason they said they had to leave is because they were basically being told what they could say and what they couldn't say when it comes to certain topics. So to me, it's like once you have, if it's not an independent news organization that has some credibility built into it, I feel like it's at this point all that stuff is National Enquirer to me.
Yeah, but what I will say though about whether it's News Nation, The Hill, really the only two networks that are covering it in depth. They really are, like they're in depth. And so they had mentioned something about like, because and I think they asked the female anchor what would the distraction be? Because and that's my question. It's like, is it Hunter Biden? Is it Trump? Like what?
We have an election year.
But what I'm saying though is, if it's either one of those, well, they're not doing a good job then. Because
certainly,
because in Fox, on CNN, on every other big network, it's never the number one story, if at all. If at all. Yeah, like Chris Cuomo is the only one that like puts in, I think, that I've seen so far that puts in like he's going like full in on it.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it's the question is, who is it a number one story to?
Right.
And that's the thing. So like, if you're the kind of person who questions establishment talking points, then you're probably attracted to this topic. And if you're focused on this topic, you're probably not focused on other topics they don't want you focused on. And, that would be like corruption charges against both leading candidates in an election year. So essentially, I mean, there's lots of like stuff going around post pandemic about like, different, information coming about what actually happened here and there, whatever it is, and whatever ends up being the truth and all that kind of stuff. There's really it's very hard right now in this issue to point the finger at a specific person or group of people who are involved with doing anything nefarious, because the whole thing is still so nebulous. But if we're looking over here and we're just really into this, if it's red meat on the bone for us, you can only look at so much in a day. And I'm going to tell you myself, like, I am a person who likes to hear, news coverage of political corruption and stuff like that. I like knowing that kind of stuff. Sometimes I need to check out, but this is way more interesting to me. And I see myself as someone who could be on a hook, like I could be a big fish on a hook, and they got me because I'm more interested in this than any of that other shit.
Me too, because it's what we talked about earlier, right? It's because it's inside of your head. Like, I do think that you and I fit into that category that we want to believe, right? And it's like that thing, like, and we are also asking those questions, like we just talked about when it comes to Greer. Like, you can't believe everything, and maybe down the line, it's like, well, you should have listened to everything, right? Like, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, like the Peru stuff. Like, I don't believe any of that stuff happened, right, at all. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but like, but there are the things that I'm tuning into that I want to know about because of what we talked about. If this is all factual, this is going to be the biggest event in human history, like ever. Like,
I just think, and again, like, just to put a ribbon on it, like, this is how you turn up the heat slowly so that we don't have people freaking out.
Yeah. All right. Before we move on, I want to tell you guys real quick about two of our sponsors here, both Green Chef and Rocket Money. All right, guys, I've told you so many times about Rocket Money. I found Rocket Money a long time ago, and I started using them way before they were on a sponsor. I'll tell you that. Like, I found it because I had so many different subscriptions. I did that thing where, that seems like a cool app. And then, just join it for free. And then you join it for free. And then you're getting billed every month for the next however long and didn't realize where it comes. But what happens is they tell you what you're paying for. And they can basically tell you, stop doing that. No more of that. We'll cancel that for you. And they tell you everything. Because if those subscriptions, man, they can drain your wallet. And if you didn't know this, the average person has around 12 paid subscriptions. and they might not even remember subscribing to half of those. If you have no idea on how much you're spending each month, you really do need Rocket Money. It's a great, great app. It tracks all your expenses, and you know exactly where your money is going. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, and it helps you lower your bills all in one place. So stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way. Go to rocketmoney.com/thing. That is rocketmoney.com/thing. rocketmoney.com/thing. Green Chef. You guys know how much I love Green Chef. They are the #1 meal kit for eating clean. You can feel your best during the busy season with delicious, nutritionist-approved recipes featuring clean ingredients with no artificial colors, sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, and limited added sugar and limited processed ingredients. You can choose from recipes featuring lean proteins like turkey, sockeye salmon, barramundi, tilapia, scallops, shrimp, the whole 9 yards, guys. It's the best. You can eat clean the easy way with recipes that help manage your weight and support your wellness goals without skipping on flavor. You really will feel your best. I love Green Chef. I've been using them for a while now. I love their meats. I love turning things into rice bowls now, and I make these healthy burritos out of them, and I'm grilling all the time, and I love Green Chef. I've been making a lot of the shrimp bowls too. I like putting those on the grill. I like following their recipes a lot of times. I didn't know I could do half of this stuff, and they make it really easy. If you go to greenchef.com/60things and use the code 60things, you're going to get 60% off plus free shipping. Good deal here this month. greenchef.com/60things and use that code 60things and you're going to get 60% off plus free shipping. Green Chef, baby. The #1 meal kit for eating well. All right, thanks again to our friends over at Green Chef and Rocket Money. Once again, if you're brand new to the show, you've never been here before, super helpful to keep the show going, that if you want to support the show and you want to support this channel, look at one of our sponsors. Take a look, see if it's right for you. I link it in the description, but I also pin it as the first comment. So if you're able to, check them out. And yeah, let's move on to the next. Let's bring Peter back.
Hey.
I got it. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk to you about is you brought up before with the reporting on those two people. I don't know where it's from now, not the Hill, but they were on the Hill.
Breaking points.
Breaking points?
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought they did an excellent job on that interview. So for people who don't know what happened over the last course of the week, we talked about it on Big Thing briefly on Wednesday's episode. So David Grusch, who was the UFO UAP whistleblower, was on News Nation. It was the first place he gave his interview, and he had given all these facts. And during that interview itself, he actually talked about his PTSD and incidents that he had in his life, and that he was suicidal at one point. That was all in there, but they cut it out for the actual full interview. But they have it. Russ Coulthart had it, and he just didn't put it in the interview itself. So then there was this reporter, and I forget Ken Klippenstein or something.
Ken Klippenstein.
And so Ken Klippenstein then, to his own admission, got a tip from various sources through the DOD, other places that just in general, a couple of different places that he had gotten tips for, and then did a piece on David Grusch documenting when Grusch came back from Afghanistan. It had the 2 episodes of PTSD and alcoholism and things with his wife and things of this nature. And it essentially seemed like he was trying to discredit him inside of the thing. His argument was that he was just bringing it to light, that everyone's painting him as this hero, which he is, but there's also some other things you should look at too, which the reporters, like, they're rightfully so, are saying, well, yeah, but what it looks like is you're trying to say because he had PTSD, which so many different soldiers and people go through, obviously, and alcoholism, which a lot of them, and they even said it's not, there's no proof that he's an alcoholic now. But by doing this, it just seems like you're trying to say because of that, you shouldn't take him serious. And to me, that's gross.
Well, dude, and to look, the interesting thing about this particular coverage that you're describing is those 3 people have worked together a lot. So
Yeah.
Ken Klippenstein is closely linked to Breaking Point. So I thought this was perfect because if anybody was going to give them the business, it was them. And he's already considered, and he's already considered credible by those two. So it's perfect. You know, it couldn't have happened better. But yeah, number one, they talk about, and to Ken Klippenstein's credit, he says it wasn't the PTSD, which, by the way, I heard Cuomo talk about that people are calling it PTS now because it's no longer considered a disorder. And I really appreciate that because, yeah, dude, like, why should you be considered someone with a disorder if you are stressed out and freaked out by crazy shit you went through? That's like normal response.
Post-traumatic stress.
Yes,
for sure.
dude. Okay, so yeah, to Ken Klippenstein's credit, he didn't really get tripped up on that part of it. He was concerned with the alcoholism claims by both of his current wife and his ex-wife. And so, but yeah, dude, to me, this is textbook bullshit because I'll point you to this, and if you haven't ever seen it, I forget the name of the author. It's a very well-known book, and I look like an idiot not knowing the name of the author, but there's a book called Propaganda. It's a short book, Propaganda, and it's essentially outlines how you deal with discrediting people and misinformation, and how the first thing you do when you have an opponent or a rival who's trying to make a case against your interests is you discredit the person.
Right.
And so you can do as simple as saying that person's crazy, or saying, I don't know, he's a big drinker. I'm like, this is wild to me, and it's probably something more pertinent that people latch on to than even the UAP discussion, because this is an easy way that for the rest of time, if anybody ever comes out and says, guys, the person or the people or the organization in charge of X are actually doing Y, and we should know about it, and someone goes, that guy shit his pants in 4th grade.
Right.
Don't listen to him. He shits his pants. You know what I mean? And it's like it's not a great source potentially, but that does not discredit the information and throwing out the baby with the bathwater. All the same, there's a reason those things exist, because we want imperfect source or some, I don't know the name of it. The point is, I'm not stopping my interest, and I still think it's interesting. And maybe the guy is dealing with crazy alcoholism because he knows crazy shit.
Yeah, but they said we don't even know if he's still even dealing with alcoholism now.
It's 8 years ago.
And I don't know how much credit I give him on that too, by the way, because that was after he was getting the amount of bombardment on,
of course,
social media and all these things about how dare he go after someone with PTS. So you could have been backtracking at that point to go like, well, man, that's not what I really should have been saying. He
disclosed it with Ross Coulthart. He disclosed it. There's video of him saying, Ross asked him, like, what is something that someone could say about you to discredit you? Yeah. And he says, well, this, and this. And so right there, I'm like, what else do you want the guy to do? Is it that anybody who's ever had any trouble in their life can no longer bring any malfeasance to light? That's crazy.
Well, that discredits most people working anywhere. But I think that that just made him that I don't think of any that didn't make him less credible to me.
I was waiting for the discrediting shoe to drop, and I'm like, this will only happen if he gets to a certain point where people are taking this very seriously. Something will happen. You can go throughout history.
You can't though on this because of because first of all, we're in a very different place as a society when dealing with mental health also. So it's not the 1930s when if you admit that you had an issue that everyone thinks you're not fit for something, or you can't do this, or you showed your it's not like that. So that was part one where it didn't work at all, right? So where you can't say that about someone to where I don't think it's going to do anything to them. I think because the other issue is now if the report was that when he was interviewing these people he was hammered, right? If he was drinking, he was drinking on the job. We found reports that this guy was drunk when he would show up to work. He wouldn't show up sometimes. There were times that they had to look for him, like he was making up stuff in his reports. Then I go, I don't know. Well, then maybe he didn't even remember doing this, but that's not the case. They gave him his clearance afterwards. He was done. He wasn't drinking on the job. At least that's not what was in the report. And that was the other thing I thought was so brilliant about the interview, where because he's like, oh, well, I talked to these people and they said that he's not credible. And the guy goes, well, where was that in your report?
Right.
You didn't put that in your report that they said that. And he's like, well, I don't know. It's like that whole thing stunk. That whole thing stunk. Like that was clearly, this is the reporter himself, I believe, was a skeptic and looking at
he said he was.
He absolutely, but
he said he flat out does not believe that this is real.
He doesn't. And so because of that, they used him to say, hey, look, check this out over there. And he's like, okay. And this is the most anyone's ever heard of Ken Klippenstein ever because of this, right? And this is also a guy who gets off on confrontation. If you look at his Twitter, this guy loves to throw down with people. Like he was trolling people, and like he was on Twitter and he was saying, oh, I got let go for the first time in whatever it was. I got let go to do, and then he ... His next tweet was to do a newsletter, and he likes doing this, and so that's the perfect guy for someone to go, hey, Ken Klippenstein, go and look over there, and he did
that. If you flip the questions that people throw at Grusch or people like him over at Klippenstein and whoever gave him the information, it suddenly you can see a motive. Like this guy, A, doesn't believe flat out, he said it, and B, he actually does stand to profit off a story like this.
Of course he does. But that's not his fault though as a reporter though.
Absolutely not. I still think you cover it if you think it's legit. But if you were someone who's like, I want to see this play out without interference, I want to see what this boils and bubbles up to. You know that if you bring out the, hey, he was an alcoholic once, that's going to throw a variable into the mix that could muddy the whole thing up. So they'd
have to prove, but they really have to prove, like I said, they have to prove that it actually
it's not going to work,
affected his reports, and it's not going to happen. What needs to happen next, in order to really, for people that really want to protect Grusch, the more whistleblowers need to come out. And from the reports, whether you hear what James Fox says, James Fox says that those are going to be coming out in the next 7-8 months. We're going to see more of them. So we'll see. I did want to move on to two other stories. One is what do you want to cover first, the Malaysia one or the Peru?
Well, the Peru one we can debunk fast. Let's get to that one, and I'm desperate to talk about Malaysia.
Okay. So the Peru one was, I was getting texts and tweets and Instagram and all that about, did you check out the Peru thing? Check out the Peru thing. And so what they were saying, and this was covered on all over the news on Peru, is that there were like reports of like 7-foot aliens running around capturing villagers and peeling faces off of villagers and all this shit. And I'll be honest, right away when it was reported, I'm like, and it'll be fine. I was like, no, but I'll tell you. But do you know why I said no right away? And it's probably not the reason to say it, but I've been so paying attention to the stuff at Roswell and the reports at like the one in Zimbabwe, the one in Brazil. And these humps are supposed to be like 4 feet tall.
Okay, wait. You're right. There's very rarely do they talk about that. However, though, there's like recently if it is, and I do think it's BS for the record, but I have heard people describe a second type of alien race in my reading and research of this stuff. There's specifically a case of two guys. I can't remember if it's a father and a son or something like that. And I want to say it's late 70s or early 80s. And they were on a fishing dock and they were, both like abducted. And the beings that they described were really tall. And they had an artist illustrate their description. And they basically had these like instead of a face, they were just antenna protruding. And it was super interesting. And it's one of those cases where it passed my BS meter, like my BS detector. So, and then I've also heard people talk about something called tall grays. I don't know if you've heard that, to differentiate them. So I'm still saying I think this is BS, but my reasoning to think it's BS is that, boy, oh boy, it sounds like we should have some pictures of that.
Yeah, well, it's a grainy footage. They have pictures of the guy. It's pretty gnarly. The guy whose face got ripped off. Yeah, but I mean that could have been done by
anybody can rip their face off nowadays.
Sure, but I'll tell you though, that's what I can't remember what report it was, but it was something like that. There were like neighboring villages that were doing kidnappings and things of that nature that wanted to scare the shit out of these people, so they dressed up. I find that to be more credible. Than aliens deciding to just chase around people in Peru for some reason today.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that one to me stinks.
Yeah, I'm definitely not like pursuing this one anymore than just it's interesting. I like the funny thing is sci-fi.com covered it, and the first picture they put is a picture of the Predator.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, but the unfortunate part is that it does lend itself to the stigma now, right? Because if you and I, we're going to believe in the credible ones, right? So like, we know the credible ones, we've paid attention to the credible ones. You know, we have, whether, you know, whatever you feel about the Virginia case, right? In Brazil, there's enough there to make you go, whoa, there's a lot going on here that you can say, what the hell happened in this town, right?
Yeah.
But if someone who just is, again, using my friend DJ, who is just paying attention for the first time and goes, see, it's just people dressing up as aliens and cutting people's freaking faces off. You know, it's like, this is what people are doing. This is crazy.
This is going to be the new normal. Like if this continues, unfortunately, I feel like this is going to be the new thing where, like, you know, remember those YouTube videos of people dressing up as clowns and standing in the street?
Yes.
Like, this is going to be the new thing. Like, I'm actually ready for like college kids dressing up as aliens and like running around in the middle of the night and then eventually getting their asses whooped by someone.
I know, but that's the problem, dude, now with the amount of technology, with what we have with AI and what we have with like people who are really good at VFX and stuff too, is that if you browse down, go down, whether it's UFO Twitter or whatever it might be, there's tons of UFO footage right now. Some of them you look at and you go, whoa, is that real? And then you look at it and you're like, well, yeah, but how do you study that now? Because somebody who's really good at, like, I think like Zach King, right, on Instagram. I feel like Zach King, if he wanted to, could do a pretty good UFO video, right? And it's like, so that's the type of stuff you got to be careful. But this is, so let's talking about that. So this is the one that's been circulating around, and I want to play this for people and see what everybody thinks. Hold on. Okay, so here's you have not seen this yet.
No.
All right, so this is, you see this right now. It looks like a satellite. Now this is potential. People think potentially that Malaysia flight that disappeared. Whoa. Look at this now. So this is something circulating, right? And then, well, now watch this. Now there's two of them. And then there's three of them.
Oh my God.
Now watch what happens though as it goes. And again, it's titled with "If This Is Legit."
This is
the scariest one so far. Now watch. This is the crazy thing. If this is a Malaysia flight. So, and then it goes through the clouds. You see it go through the clouds, and because a lot of people are going to go, "Oh, it went through the clouds. Of course, it disappeared," but it's still there. And then watch this.
Oh, fuck.
Right. So now
I'm never getting on a plane again. I just got off a plane last night. I'm never going.
But look, the satellite goes to the side, and they go, "Where is it?" And it's gone. So okay. Look, I don't know.
Holy shit, dude.
Now people are thinking
no one's debunked this yet.
There's no, not yet, but there's no confirmation that that's the Malaysia flight. But if you know the Malaysia case, that flight was in the air, and then it just disappeared. And they said, where did it go? And there's a whole Netflix documentary on it. Like, where did it go? And then the government tried to do like this, like how a piece of the plane fell, and the people were like, this is bull. This is part of the plane. This is bullshit. And so that was debunked, that it wasn't part of the plane. So this is this is the one that just started coming out. I don't know if this is one of the things that, like, where I don't have, this is my point before that I was making you. This could have been made by somebody really good.
Total dog shit.
100%. Someone going, you know what? I just watched this Malaysia thing on Netflix, and there's no real explanation for it. And now all this UFO stuff going on. Watch what I'm going to do. And he does this thing,
100%,
and he puts it out there. And but the flip side is, if this one turns out, I got to see. I mean, I would love to. So to let everybody know, I actually reached out. I told you this. I haven't told you this on air, but so I reached out to James Fox. And James Fox actually gave me his number to call him, to get him on the show. And then the guy's really busy. But I got ghosted, Peter. I got ghosted, but kind of. So I got ghosted, and I was supposed to. He's like, I'm gonna give you a call, and it was a weird time. It was like 75 minutes. Is what he said. I said, okay, cool. And I didn't hear from him. So I'm like, all right. So then I'm like, well, and I sent him a message later on, and I was like, hey, James, it looks like we missed each other. I'd love to have you on the show. So then I was actually reading Leslie Kean's book while I got a notification on my phone, just with like a check mark or a heart or whatever on the comment. And it was James Fox. And that's the last I heard of him. So I don't know. I'd love to get him on the show. I'd love to have him on the show, but I'd love to ask him this. I would love to ask him about this, like this Malaysia one. Like, is this?
I'm surprised if this. Now it's the only thing I'm going to look up online after this, but I'm surprised there isn't more coverage that I've come across. Now I've been out of the loop for the last few days, but
it could be dog shit. It could be bullshit. Yeah. It could be bullshit.
That's what I think the benefit of the show is like, now I hope everybody watching this and in the comments is going to go and look into it. And then maybe by the next time we go or you go live, you'll have some, updates, whether it's, crowdsourced or whether some things come up officially. But that's why this show needs to happen, because I guarantee your listeners and your viewers are shrewd enough to say, hold on, let me take this take this up and see what we can figure out.
There's a lot going on about this particular case, at least where I'm looking at. But like, so hold on, let's see. Someone said, which one is this video gets more and more real by the hour? I guess is this another one? I don't know if this is the one. I'm not sure. I don't know. But either way, I'd love to get people's thoughts on it to find out, because as you said before too, you can't just go in blindly and believe everything. So I would love to hear and see what I will keep my ears on. I just thought it was fascinating, because if that one is real, dude, if that one is real,
that's a game changer.
That's a game changer. It's like,
that's a game changer, and that would be another reason to not let it get out, because I am already just watching that like less likely to jump on a plane anytime soon. But
just disappeared. These three things made it disappear, like interdimensionally.
That makes me think that makes me think it's somewhere else. It didn't just like disintegrate. They probably took it somewhere.
It's like Lost style,
like Lost, dude. But what's funny is, like, I was talking about this with a buddy of mine. Is like, one thing that really interests me about this topic is how much it could explain in our unexplainable, cases of the world. Like, imagine ghosts, the paranormal activity, stuff like that. There are a lot of people who talk about ghosts where I'm like, I believe this person saw something, and I don't believe that ghosts exist personally.
Right.
And I have a conflict. But what if it's just interdimensional stuff and technology that we don't understand?
Time and space. We don't know anything about time and space. We don't know anything. We think that we don't know that much. We don't know.
And that's, I think, the healthiest outlook and view to have is, I know how much I don't know, and it's 100%. Or I don't know how much I don't know, but I'm guaranteed it's a lot.
100%, dude. We don't have no idea. We have no idea, and it's like, because we like to live in the world we live in, and the rules that we told are the rules. They're not the rules. They're just the rules we know.
I know, dude. I think about that all the time.
The rules.
I think about what an inversion it would be if there was some democratization of technology like that. What it would mean.
Well, to me, that's the other thing. Always people don't realize, like, is time travel and all that stuff, right? Like, time travel in general, like, the idea of it, is it possible? Of course it's possible. Do we have the technology to do it? No, of course not. Like, what you'd have to do with black holes and all this kind of stuff in order to make it happen, like us, like, it's not. But it's like the idea of it and the way that time and space works at a time, and that's the way it works on this planet. You don't know how it works on other planets and other dimensions and other things, like, too. People, and that's the other thing that's so foreign for people to realize, like, what a quantum. They think the problem is, like, when you say quantum realm and those things, right? Ant-Man. It's like, no,
I know.
But it's like the quantum realm and the way quantum physics and all these things, like, really work. And I was talking about this with Brett on Big Thing yesterday. I'm fascinated by quantum physics and all that. Yeah. I'm just not smart enough to know it all. If so, I wouldn't be doing this. I would be working in quantum physics. But I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated by the energy planes and all those different things and how that works. And you're right. It could answer so many different questions. That's why I hope, at least in my lifetime, that I get to find out some kind of information about what the hell it is.
Me too. I think about that. I've always thought this, if time travel is possible at all, it already exists by definition.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Right. Like, if it's ever possible, then it already exists somewhere. And if we could figure it out, wouldn't we go back in time and forward in time and try to figure it out?
That's not how it works. But that's not how it works. So if you believe in the like quantum physics and the way that time works, is that this time. That's the one thing that you say like Endgame did get right.
Did get right, like splintering off the timelines.
It's just a different. It's just like you wouldn't change if you went back and you changed like where you and I met at Skybound.
Right.
If you decided you weren't going that day and we never met each other.
Right.
You'd still know me in this timeline. You just wouldn't know me in that one.
Ah, that's crazy, dude. Brain breaking. How can people not want to discuss this stuff? That's what I think about. You know, that's why I think this topic is so exciting, and we need to discuss it so that we don't go into, you know, the next phase of our life like blind and unprepared.
That's what I'm saying. That's why if they are holding back this type of information, it is the biggest crime ever, because it is the most arrogant crime ever, because the fact that this one particular organization throughout multi-governments across the world working together decided they should know more than other people that could benefit the human race is the I guess the epitome of what the bad side of humanity is.
100% gatekeeping.
That's it. All right, look, that was our show today, man. I'm glad you had John. It was a good one. We had a good discussion. There'll be more. Like, there's always stuff to talk about.
What did we learn? Sum it up for us. What did we learn?
Shoot, man, we learned Peru was horse crap. We don't really know yet what we feel about Steven Greer. We're on the fence. We're on the fence. We're on the fence with Steven Greer. We do believe that if that Malaysia video, if that is the Malaysia flight, and if that is the UFO, that could be the most compelling one. If that one isn't debunked and that one is proven, that's the craziest one thus far. I believe that David Grusch is a decorated war vet and should be judged on his merit of his testimony and not on past behavior that he got treatment for, and that has nothing to do, that it was clearly a smear campaign. And we learned that you and I can talk about this stuff for hours. Yeah,
that's a lot. That's like a lot of value for one stream. Let me tell you.
I think so.
People should subscribe.
That's right. If you haven't done that already, do me a favor and hit that button. We are almost at 90,000 subscribers. We're aiming towards 100,000. We hope that you guys will join us. If you like this show, you're brand new to the show. I know you have so many new subscribers from these particular shows, and you want to support the show and you're able to, please consider, if it's right for you, obviously, and you have the means, to get one of those sponsors, because it keeps the show going, and that's how you can support us. We don't really do the super chats and the Streamlabs and stuff. Although we did the Streamlabs for the last one, and if we have any questions, I will put those into the show as well. Nice. But I'd like to thank Peter for joining us today. Peter, where can the good peeps find you?
You can find me anywhere online at Attack Peter, Instagram, and you can follow I'm an artist. You can follow my artwork there. Check me out on YouTube also at Attack Peter. I do live streams Wednesday nights where I make artwork live. My wife Gabby and I talk about all the fun nerdy news out there, and we just have a great time on Wednesday. So check us out there.
All right. So thanks again to Peter, and thank you to you guys. All right. So for myself and Attack Peter, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Later, guys.